Well, at the time when the service opened, there was no free legal service available on the ground between Shepparton, that's where there was a legal aid office, and Wagga Wagga. And it's nearly the same, apart from the fact that there is one legal aid service in Albury now, so that's great. We had, as Luke said, Commonwealth Government funding. It was around 200,000 back then, which meant we weren't restricted by the state boundary and could service clients from both sides of the border. The steering committee that had been operating for some time that Luke alluded to was still very much an active part of the legal service when we first started, and they were made up of various people from various community organisations. So it meant that as soon as we opened the door, we were able to hit the ground running because all of those people were well connected in with the community and started referring their clients to us. So I think we had maybe a quiet first week, but after that it was on, and so it had a huge impact. There were the clients were flowing through the door right from the word go, and we were just booking appointments one after the other every day of the week, and yeah, certainly the demand was definitely there. But a key feature really of the early success and strength of the service were the two lawyers that we had. Helen McGowan, who, for those who know her, is very strong in terms of networking and connecting with the community. So she made a huge impact on improving access to justice just because of the way she brought various organisations together. And then Trish Devlin, she had a background in, she was a good, very, very good criminal lawyer, but also had worked in child protection and was also a former psychiatric nurse. So she had a great combination, and she did a lot of the early casework and court work and established the intervention order scheme at the Wodonga Court. But anyway, probably should stop talking now. Keep going.
So Karen Bowley, can you tell us when did you start at the HRCLS? Although when you started it had a different name, and just tell us about what some of the top milestones were in your time.
Thanks. It's going down memory lane. I think I started in 2004, and one of the things I remember mostly was when we moved over to Lawrence Street, which was a tiny little building. It was very cold, and we felt very grown up because we'd moved out of home, which we were in 2 rooms in that brick building next door, and we finally moved out to a different building separately. But we had to do that because we were growing. And in fact, over the years that I was principal lawyer, I think we must have moved about 3 times, and it was because the service was constantly growing. So we got our New South Wales, we got our Victorian Legal Aid family lawyer, which was very, very exciting because, as Allison said, we didn't have a legal aid office anywhere near us. Shepparton or Wagga were the only 2. So getting that lawyer was amazing. It was quite controversial at the time. Lots of CLCs were offered the chance to do that, but I think we were one of only 2 that took up that offer. And it's still going today and going strong, so that's fabulous. Shifting. I think Luke's told you all the places we've moved. But yeah, it's good to be home in this beautiful modern building.
And Karen Keegan, you're obviously a current staff member, but can you tell everyone when you came to the service and what your role was and your journey with HRCLS, and tell us about a couple of the important initiatives that you saw the service introduce?
Thanks, Sarah. I came to the service in 2007 as the Victorian Community Outreach Lawyer, and then after a period of time I remember I was doing supervision one day with Karen, who was the principal, and she asked me perhaps what my aspirations were, and I said I want your job. Remember? And I did eventually become the principal lawyer, but I didn't do it by any foul means. But to me at that early stage, I realised what a magnificent organisation it was, and that if I had the opportunity to lead it and to continue to grow it, that's what I wanted to do. And for me, I guess the two things that really stick in my mind is over the time is the commitment this service has had to students and to training and mentoring. And in particular, we had a partnership for probably about 3 or 4 years with the Charles Darwin University, where we used to have students come here for 2-week periods of time to do work experience with us. And that probably, whilst we used to have students before that, that really gave our service momentum, I think, as to then our ongoing commitment to taking PLT students and to taking law students. We have universities here, but we don't have law students. But we had people actively seeking to come here, to be here, because we have open arms. And my view is that I believe that our service has directly influenced many lawyers over the time that are out there now in other parts of Australia, but will always have fond memories of the opportunities we gave them here at the HRCLS. And the only other point, the second point, which is really important, was Karen alluded to the VLA Secondi lawyer. I just want to acknowledge you, Karen, because you had the foresight to say, yes, we want to do this, when a lot of other services said they didn't, because the community legal sector were a little wary of taking a VLA lawyer into their organisation for a range of reasons. Karen said, no, we're going to do it, and we have done it, and we still have a VLA lawyer here today, which means that we are providing additional services to people here on the border because there's no VLA. Our closest VLA office is in Shepparton, so thank you, KB, for your,
It's a cross-border position too.
Oh, it is. Well, they do work into New South Wales, well, because it's family law, it's a federal jurisdiction. So, but I do think that probably the students and that amazing decision by Karen Bowley are two things that I think we need to be commended for, because we're always out there trying to hunt down money and funding, which you still do, Sarah. And may I say thank you for doing it as well.
So Karen Bowley, what's one of the best client outcomes that you saw during your time that perhaps might not have been achieved without the legal services help?
I think most of the work that we do, all of the work we do, helps the disadvantaged and the vulnerable. And I just think it's wonderful that we've got such a service as this in our area. I'm just always disappointed lately at the way that the poor people in particular, and those on sentiment benefits who are our main clients, are, I don't know, demeaned and punished for being poor. So I think it's great that the work that we do, we're non-judgmental, we help everybody who comes to our door that we can, and yeah, keep up the good work, we need it.
So one more question for Allison. So at the very start, although I've got a quote here that you famously once said, "I'll never become a lawyer," but I'd like to think that we were a part of the journey, or the legal services are part of the journey, because obviously you are now a lawyer of your own law firm and the president of the Auburn District Law Society. But did you want to talk a little bit more about the work that you had to do to set up the service? Because I believe there was a lot of work in policies and procedures, and just to start the service from the very get-go, what did you do back then?
Just reflecting, it was a really exciting time to be part of the organisation, because when we first opened the door, as I said before, we just saw everyone that came in. And I was not from a legal background, and I was not from the community sector either. I was a sales and marketing executive up in hotels in Sydney, and I'd moved back home having grown up in the region. So I knew the area well, but I didn't know this industry, so it was very new to me. I learned a lot from Helen and Trish, it was a huge eye-opener for me. But what I was good at was organising things. So I could see that in the chaos that was going on, we couldn't continue this that way. Helen and Trish were seeing 8 or 9 clients a day, every day. They were taking on casework from pretty much all of them. There were no, there was a certain level of making sure that they acted for people and took on matters that were worthy, but there were a few that probably slipped through the system. But we thought there's no point reinventing the wheel, so we started to go to all of the exciting CLC conferences. I think the first one that I went to was down at the town hall in Melbourne, the corner there of Lygon and Victoria Street, and everyone was eating vegan food and wearing purple, and I was like, wow, this is cool. But it was great. Everyone was so passionate about what they were doing, but they did have good systems in place. They had structure. They ran clinics. They got supporting from the private practitioners. So straight away when we got back, we were putting together the volunteer list of lawyers. We were going out to the local law firms and asking them what they did, what they specialised in, how we could refer people to them. So we then started to also develop, and a lot of this came through compliance requirements, which I thought were pretty heavy on, but anyway. There was a policy and procedure manual, which I like to think I sort of put it out in my memory, but every time I see Helen McGowan, she reminds me of the SSPI manual that I assisted in putting together. So that I think it stood for Service Standards and Performance Indicators. It was a red folder and it sat up on the shelf, but it really didn't just sit there. It was a big job to get it put together and prepared. It dealt with everything from conflicts of interest through to how we ran our clinics and who would be eligible to use the service. So it was a lot of work had to be done, but by the end of it, we were a well-oiled machine.
Yes, great.
Thank you. So 2 more things. Karen Keegan, can you tell us a bit about the outreach that you did and some of the perils of outreach that lawyers can face? And then I'll just ask you all if you could, I guess, make some comments about what do you think the future holds for our service and perhaps some advice as we go forward into the next 20 years.
Thanks, Sarah. Perils of outreach. The perils of outreach is actually going on outreach with Ali Ma. Ali Ma is one of our fantastic lawyers. I spoke to her today and asked her if she didn't mind I told this story. But Ali, when Ali first started, she was community development, and we had to do a community presentation out at Corowa, I think it was. So, Ali kept assuring me that everything was organised. Yes, it's done, got the car, got this, got that. So we get in the car and out we go. And I said, where are we going? I've got it all organised, everything's fine. So we're driving. We'd left late, time is ticking, and this thing was due to kick off. So anyway, we got to Corowa, and we couldn't find this place, I tell you. And I lost a little bit of my humour. And I'm like, Ali, up and down these streets, in and out. We didn't know, we went past this place about 5 times, but it was set back off the road. And it was an elderly group of people, and they were waiting for us to talk to them about wills and power of attorney. So eventually, after some words between the 2 of us and a bit of stress, we finally found this place, and this guy was pacing up and down, and we were about probably 10 minutes late. Said to Al, we really have to nail this when we get in there. No worries. So we jumped out of the car. I never forgot it. We just raced in, and see those TV shows where you see the cartoon where someone runs in the room? Well, that was it. And I ran in and I said, good afternoon, Karen Keegan from the Southern Riverina Community Legal Service. So glad to see you all here today. And Ali's setting it all up, and I just went straight into it. And afterwards, they just thought it was fantastic. Don't know how we did it, Al, but
We've got sandwiches up.
I know. But the perils of outreach is that sometimes you do have to go to places where you don't know you're going, talk to people you don't know. We do travel a lot of long distances, travel in storms and flat tyres and a lot of other things that happen. But you mentioned the cross-border, and you saw our catchment area. We do travel certainly out to Dinnilook and Finley and places like that, which take a bit of time, but those people really need our help as well. The future is really, really important, because the community legal sector is a very important sector in our legal framework. And I guess the future that I want to see for the Southern Riverina Community Legal Service is that we're still here in another 20, 30, 40, 50. But it would be really great that we didn't have to go from such sort of lurch from funding to funding. It would be great that the government's put in funding that gave us funding for longer periods of time, that we weren't always, you know, there's been times when we've been coming up into June and we didn't even know if we had money to pay people in July. And in my view, that's a really, and we're not the only sector, but it is very important. But the big thing I just want to finish off with is that this organisation will always be able to move forward because the people we have in this team of people are just amazing. And the people who come into the sector have passion. And while we have that, that's the future of our service, just as long as we can get continued funding.
I can only agree with all of that. And yes, the funding, having only funding for, sometimes it's only 12 months, but yeah, 3 years, it's not satisfactory. People need job security and that doesn't give it to you. I think it's just exploiting the passion of the people who work in this sector. And yes, I certainly hope to see the legal service still continuing in 20 years' time. Yeah.
We won't be volunteering then.
No, definitely won't be volunteering. But yeah, keep up all the good work. Great team. Even though I'm retired, I do miss you all. But yeah, I'm not sure about coming to work. I just miss you all as wonderful people.
Yeah, it's been great. Just this journey and learning and remembering what went on back in those. We had a couple of years crossover, and one thing I forgot to mention when we were talking about, when I was talking about the policies and procedures and things, another thing we did were planning days. I don't know who came up with that idea, but that was a great idea, and we went off and we climbed Mount Buffalo as part of that, and we did all sorts of things, but yeah, it's been really good to reflect. But I think moving forward into the future, and this has been something that the Community Legal Service has done all along, is collaborate with other groups in the community, in the sector, and I'd like to see that continues into the future, and probably even more so. Groups like the Cooperative Legal Services Delivery Model, that's been an initiative of Legal Aid, that has been part of those sorts of projects, being part of working with the local private practitioners, continuing to involve them and lean on them to some extent to volunteer in the service, continuing that collaboration within the community legal sector, so there's shared learnings. That's what I like to see continue, and hope that the future holds more of that.
That's wonderful. We're going to now cut the cake.